Well, hello and welcome to News Centre. I am Ashmit Kumar. Now, uncertainty continues for online pharmacies even close to 6 years after a plea challenging the sale of online medicines was first taken up by the Delhi High Court. Yesterday, the government told the court that it has not been able to frame a policy even after the court directed it to do so way back in February of 2019. So let's quickly take you through the sequence of events, the timeline. In October of 2018, the South Chemists and Distributors Association had moved the Delhi High Court against the sale of online medicines. They claimed that the Drugs and Cosmetics Act simply does not allow online sale of medicines. In December of that year, that's 2018, the court passed an order stopping the online sales of medicines by e-pharmacies without licenses. I stress on those words, without licenses. They'll come into play in just a bit. Now, later in the month of February of 2019, the court asked the centre to frame a policy on sale of medicines by e-pharmacies. That policy, 5 years later, is yet to be framed. In November of last year, the court had expressed frustration. The centre had sought more time from the court, saying consultations were underway. The big question that, of course, now arises is, what is the centre thinking? Will we see a policy on online sale of medicines anytime in the near future? Joining us now to discuss this issue going forward is Yash Aggarwal, the legal head of South Chemists and Distributors Association, the petitioner before the Delhi High Court. He's joining us now. Also on the show with us is Rajeshwari Hariharan. She's an advocate at the Delhi High Court as well as Mr. Murali Neelakantan. He's a man who wears many hats, that of a lawyer, a director and an author as well. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us. First, let me go across to Mr. Yash Aggarwal. Mr. Aggarwal, when the Government Council appeared before the High Court yesterday, from what we hear, the words that fell from the High Court is that you're a brave man to be appearing before us with the policy not having been formed 6 years in a row. The question I want to ask you is, you moved the petition back in 2018. It's been almost 6 years since then. Has there been any indication on forward movement by the government? It's a long wait for a policy on e-pharmacy.
Good evening, everyone. Well, yes, it has been a very long wait, more than 6 years in going, and still no policy in sight. In fact, as you asked me this question, I don't see personally anything moving forward because as far the consultation process is concerned, they've done a lot of consultation. We have been, in fact, part of a lot of consultations, but nothing concrete has come in the forefront. So yes, it's a long wait, and yesterday, in fact, I think government did not even ask for some time. Usually they used to come and say that, okay, give us 4 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, whatever. But yesterday they did not ask for any time. So I'm not sure the policy is coming anytime soon for the e-pharmacy.
Let me then ask you a follow-up question. There have been nearly, from what I could see, at least on the High Court website, there have been about nearly 15 hearings in this matter. Is there a pain point that the government is pointing out? Is there an issue that they're struggling to overcome in not being able to put out a policy framework for 6 years now?
So there are a lot of things which the government is saying. In an affidavit, in another case which we filed against the government in 2020 during the COVID time, they actually admitted in the affidavit in the High Court that the online pharmacy rules, online pharmacies are not allowed under the current rules, and the meetings and the consultation process is still going on. That is all they've ever said, and they really they just come up with the same thing, which is like we are in the consultation process and it's going to take some time. It's a matter which needs a lot of deliberation, and it's not only the one act. It is not only the Drug and Cosmetic Act which needs to be amended. There's Pharmacy Practice Regulation, Magical Remedies Act. There are 3 or 4 acts together which needs to be changed to allow the online sale of medicines.
Sure. Let me take that across to Mr. Neelakantan. Mr. Neelakantan, thank you for joining us. Same question to you. In March of this year, we had the Joint Secretary of the Health Ministry being summoned by the High Court. And that was the time when the High Court had thrown up its arms and said that, look, this is a final opportunity. We can't wait anymore. It's been over 5 years. What, to your mind, appears to be the stumbling block for not having this digital policy, which seemingly runs contrary to the government's agenda of going digital with everything?
It's very difficult to explain. I don't think any of us can explain how government thinks and behaves. It's beyond us to even try to do that. The interesting factor you might consider is that in March this last year, a start question was asked in Parliament, and the Minister for Health was asked a series of questions, A, B, C, D, E, F, and we got a very woolly answer about what had happened, but nothing to give us any indication of what the government is thinking on this. I think what the government is expecting, and we've seen this in the past as well, is that the businesses will take off. They'll all become billion-dollar businesses. People will invest a lot of money in it, which we have seen in the online pharmacies. And it will just go on. Nobody will complain, and it will play itself out without a strong policy from government. If the court in those last 6 years had said, no, tomorrow you have to shut it down, you can't have any of these sales without a policy, then perhaps we'd have seen a policy. But government seems to be quite happy to allow this to continue as it is. And people with lots of money and clearly influenced with government think that this is okay. There is no real uncertainty. Government's on our side. Business is going on as usual. There is no risk to our business. And therefore, this uncertainty seems to work very well with status quo. It will only get disturbed, and that's perhaps if the courts step in and say, no, you can't have it without a policy. And then money talks, and we may see some policy.
Sure. Let me put that across to Ms. Hariharan, who's also joining us. Ms. Hariharan, this is a big pain point, the lack of clarity, e-pharmacies operating in a so-called grey space. There's a Delhi High Court proceedings that are currently underway. There are proceedings also pending before the Madras High Court. What does this lack of clarity do to the industry? Is it not in the interest of the industry to seek a resolution, to have the government actually push forward with a policy framework that gives them certainty, gives them clarity?
Absolutely. I think the industry is absolutely really looking forward for that. They really want some clarity. I don't think the industry wants to live in uncertainty. But I think it's probably the government who is believing that there will be some kind of self-regulation. If you see in the past, the history, I'm not talking about pharmacies, but if you talk about coaching centers, you talk about advertisement laws, that's how it has been. The government never came up with a regulation. And there were petitions which were being filed in one court or the other. And so therefore the bodies themselves got together and they said, now we have some kind of a self-regulating formula. We will work on this. So the government was very happy with that. High Court was happy and things stayed as it is. So similarly here, if the industry comes around and if they come with some kind of a self-regulating policy, it might be a stopgap solution. But really the long-term solution for us is really to have a proper policy as we have in the Canada or in the US or in other countries. I mean, we are a country which is a very big country, and therefore, and you know, pharmacies where people buy medicines online, any kind of medicine is being bought. There are narcotics which are being bought. There are any kind of substances which are being bought online. Surely this is something which is waiting to explode. So once you find some person who has died, it makes the headlines. Perhaps then, you know, the government will be shaken.
Interesting thought that why wait for a tragedy to take place before the government wakes up? Let me then ask you the biggest question of all. What happens in the interim period? That's one question that various stakeholders are struggling with. The petitioners before the Delhi High Court are saying that in December of 2018, 12th of December to be specific, the High Court passed a very clear order that online sales of medicines will not happen without a valid license. Ms. Hariharan, let me come to you. Is that a concern for the online pharmacy space? Are we to assume, are we to read this order and then interpret that there is no room available for operation of online e-pharmacies, that these are simple illegal operations? Is that a fair understanding?
So it's a technical question because, you know, to my mind, if I read the rules, they must be regulated. Even under the current rules, Drugs and Cosmetics Act, exhibition of drugs, stocking, exhibition, sale, advertisement also amounts to a violation. So clear, you know, if you go very, very technically, then you must have a license. But I guess the interpretation of various online companies is that they are simply aggregators. They do not sell the drug themselves. So therefore, they don't need a policy. They don't need a license. Also, the High Court's order is that if you don't have a license, then you have to shut down. Now, if you see the background to this in the law, you need to have a license for wholesale and retail. If you want to sell medicines on wholesale or retail basis, then you need to have a license. So the aggregators are saying that, look here, I'm not selling it online. I'm not the person selling. The guy who is selling probably has a license. So I'm hands off this. So they are trying to take a hands off approach. I don't think that's perfectly right. But of course, in the interim, because of this order,
interesting approach. Let me take that.
If they don't have a license, then they have to shut down. If they do have a license, then they can go on. Like Apollo Pharmacy has its license. So surely they can go on.
Sure. Let me put that across to Mr. Yash Aggarwal. Mr. Aggarwal, your quick thoughts. What is your interpretation of that December 2018 injunction stay order? Can online pharmacies operate? They claim to have a valid license and they appear to be, they claim that we are exempt from that Delhi High Court order. Mr. Aggarwal.
No, not at all. In fact, it's a misinterpreted order. See, ma'am, with due regards, obviously you say that it's something in the interim. So in the Drug and Cosmetic Act is very clear. There's a clear prohibition on it. So they say that we are aggregators and we don't need a license. We mentioned this in the court, our counsels mentioned this in the court yesterday, that the section 18 of Drug and Cosmetic is very clear, which says no person shall himself or by any other person on his behalf, which makes it very clear that irrespective of whoever is in the chain has to have a license. That's one. Secondly, the High Court order clears very clearly online sale of medicines without license. So essentially, of course, it means the license to sell online. Now, that is definitely there, that there is no license in the Drug and Cosmetic Act to sell or exhibit or stock or offer to sell on the online portals. Even in fact, we had this meeting at the DCGI office in August last year, in which the Joint Drug Controller clearly stated to the online pharmacies that whatever license you are mentioning about, it's only for that premises. It's only for that dispensation of medicines from the premises. It has nothing to do with online display of drugs or exhibition of drugs. And we do not have any license whatsoever for the exhibition of drugs on the portal.
Sure.
You can do that exhibition of drugs in that licensed premises. And not on the online portals.
Right, Mr. Aggarwal. Right, Mr. Aggarwal. Let me take that across to Mr. Neelakantan. Mr. Neelakantan, we have two very differing views on the application of that stay order. Is it in effect? Does it apply to online pharmacies? Would you care to arbitrate here that without a policy on online pharmacy, can online pharmacies claim that they do have a valid license and they can continue operations till the government policy is finally out?
Whether the pharmacies have a license or not is not about a claim. It's a fact. So if you go and check on several of these online pharmacies, they all claim to have a license in some state. I don't know how many states. Many of them have a model where the actual store that delivers these medicines to you is licensed. Often it is through franchisees or shops owned by a subsidiary. So technically, they might be in compliance with the order to say that the store that delivers medicines, however you order it, is actually licensed and it is the one dispensing drugs to you. So to that extent, they might well be complying with the order. Now, to think about whether the Drugs Act contemplated online pharmacies or not, obviously it didn't. It was written at a time when nobody contemplated online pharmacies. Now, could you then take that and take a very conservative view and say, if the law didn't contemplate something at that time, then you can't do it? It would be absurd. Law didn't contemplate most of the things that we do in our lives, doesn't contemplate video conferencing. So do we just assume that we need a license for video conferencing now? No. So we have to take a view that let's continue to do it in a manner that allows the world to progress, law will catch up. And this is where government needs to take a view. Now, the whole point of government is to make policy and implement policy. There is no other job that the government has. It has one function, the executive, is to make policy and implement policy. Now, if it fails to do that, I fail to see why we should have a government at all. This is a big failing of government to say, we don't have a policy. Well, then tell us what the policy is. Saying that we don't have a policy, I think, is an abdication of duty. It's a constitutional function. You have to make policy. To say that we don't have a policy, I think, is shameful. There is a draft lying for about 6 years. They've issued some show cause notices in 2023 to a couple of pharmacies. We don't know what's come of that. So government doing nothing, I think, is shameful. It needs to step up and say what its stand is.
Well, that's a key point, and you pointed out the DCGI notices, the show cause notices that were sent out to various e-pharmacies. Ms. Hariharan, let me draw your attention to that point. We spoke about how there are proceedings pending before the Delhi High Court as well as the Madras High Court. There are also proceedings initiated by the DCGI, the regulator in this space. Even they have issued show cause notices. Even they are citing the Delhi High Court proceedings. Does this then beg the question, why is the government causing this delay? And that the lack of that is causing various pain points for the industry as well as for the stakeholders.
I think it's very normal for the government, not to act. It would only be surprising if the government was to act very quickly. We've seen this in the past in so many other incidents, like in the advertising space or in other spaces. It's very normal for the government not to make policies. Yes, of course, and it's the common man who suffers. So online pharmacies, they continue to administer medicines, send medicines, and I don't know what sort of medicines they keep sending. And it's the common man who suffers. So I think, the government should really wake up, and they definitely need to be given a very good lesson by the court so that they make a policy. It is high time we made a policy.
Sure. Mr. Aggarwal, I'll come to you. We're running out of time here. I'll give you the closing comment here. What you pointed out at the very beginning of this discussion is that you were concerned that at the last hearing that took place just yesterday, the Government Council, as opposed to the previous 14 hearings, did not seek any time and did not give any clarity as to when this policy framework is expected. One, is that a cause of concern for you? Two, if a policy framework does come into place, what are some of your concerns that you would seek to be addressed in a manner that is consistent with the statute, the Drugs and Cosmetics Act?
Yes, of course, it's a matter of great concern. The primary reason is that the public health is getting affected. We should all consider this, that, if we do not administer sales of medicines in a proper way, public health does get affected. In fact, what ma'am said over here, that it's only after somebody will die, the government will wake up. Yes, I don't want to quote, but yes, I know a few people, some famous personality who purchased a few antidepressants online and jumped off the balcony. So anyways, let's not get into that, but yes, that has happened in the past. Secondly, yes, the 1945, nobody imagined the online pharmacy. Of course, it needs a regulation, it needs modification to the policy and the act and the rules. And yes, that is what is sincerely required. 2018, they came out with a draft. And surprisingly, 2016, they came out with a subcommittee report. 2016 subcommittee report was very accurate. It was very comprehensive. It covered all the points regarding the online sale of drugs. And 2018, surprisingly, the draft that came out was absolutely diametrically opposite to it. 2016 was very comprehensive. They, in fact, covered every single angle of the DNC Act. The main problem of online selling of drugs is the prescription. See, right now, what they work is very frivolous. If you go to any online website, they will say, have a prescription, upload. If you don't have a prescription, no problem. And they will do a teleconsultation with you, a frivolous teleconsultation, and they will send you the medications. Now, teleconsultation was, it came out in the COVID period, so that the people who can't go to a doctor can do a proper consultation with a doctor. It did not come out to sell medicines on a portal. It is like, whatever I don't have, I just message, I just type on an app, and I get a frivolous call, And just to mention here, in Gujarat High Court, there is a case against this as well, in which they have collected a lot of frivolous calls. I myself have been a party to a lot of frivolous calls. They just say, "Sir, aapka naam kya hai?" and that's it. That's it. That the consultation is done, you get the medications. So this is the way it is working. So primarily what we really need is, in public health, we need this to stop till the time there's a policy. We need a policy for e-prescription. In all these Western countries, in all the developed countries where the e-pharmacy work, it does not work without an e-prescription.
Right, Mr. Aggarwal. Right, Mr. Aggarwal. So near consensus on the panel here today on CNBC TV18 that in light of public health, we needn't wait for a public tragedy, that the government's only job is to make policy, like Mr. Neelakantan pointed out, and that is something that we need to press the pedal on. It's been 6 years in waiting. All stakeholders here seeking for clarity from the government on the way forward on a policy framework for online sale of medicines. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us and sharing their thoughts with us. But with that, it's time now for slipping into a very short break. On the other side, President Putin and Prime Minister Modi hold bilateral talks in Moscow. It is the second and final day of Prime Minister Modi's Russia visit. More details when we come back.